Hi, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. So thank you all so much for joining us here today for our Post 3 At-Large City Council Candidate Forum. My name is Allison Grady. I am one of the founders of Abundant Housing Atlanta. We are an advocacy organization who believes that it's very important that we build the homes and build the types of homes that need to be built in order to make sure that Atlanta is a place that if you want to live in Atlanta, you can afford to live in Atlanta. I want to thank our partners here at Hillside International Truth Center for hosting us. And of course, thank you to our partner organizations that helped us promote this event. And in particular, thank you to the candidates who are joining us here for offering yourselves up for public service and engaging with the public at this evening's event. That is a tough choice to make, and so we really appreciate you putting yourself out there for us. So I want to start and acknowledge that I think if you all saw the signs and the flyers, that there were 3 people on the flyer. And just to share our rationale, so this is an at-large city council seat. So that means that you have to really work very hard in order to reach people and make sure that they hear you. And that means that costs money. And so our decision to initially invite just those 3 candidates was based on June 30th. Those were the candidates who had reported that they had fundraised. We are happy, though, that the other 2 candidates have decided to join us today, and so we are happy to welcome them and all 5 candidates up on the stage. So some logistics. So we are going to begin this evening with a moderated discussion, with each candidate having 60 seconds to answer a series of questions. Candidates, pay attention. We have a volunteer here. Wave. He is going to, when you have 15 seconds left, he's going to fly a yellow. And when you are out of time, he'll have this red here. And so just finish up your thought when he shares the red. We will then transition to audience member questions. So you all hopefully see that there are note cards on your seats. So if you have a question for the candidates, feel free to write it down and then flag me and I'll collect them for you. And so we'll have about 30 minutes for that. So we'll conclude around 7:30 to then give you all a little bit of time to meet the candidates. So just to kind of frame up what we're doing here. So we at Abundant Housing Atlanta are thinking about these next couple of months before the election as a long job interview. These candidates are asking us to hire them to be on a 15-person legislative body. And we want to understand their views, but also their relevant experience, how they intend to do the job. And part of why we focus on housing locally is because members of City Council have a tremendous amount of power over what kinds of homes can be built in which neighborhoods across our city. And these decisions determine who gets to live in what neighborhood or who gets to live in this city at all. So we're going to be asking the candidates questions not just about their positions, but also how they will legislate. If you are like me and want to get into the weeds and really understand their very in-depth answers to some nerdy questions, please go to our website, abundanthousingatlanta.org. The 4 of the candidates completed that questionnaire for us. So with that, I'm excited to turn this over to our moderator, Asile Patton, and invite our 5 candidates up: Devin Barrington Ward, this is my test: Ishay Collins, Nicole Evans Jones, Amber Connor, and DeJuan Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, we'll jump right in. So we know that in lieu of a traditional intro, we want to begin with you having to tell us what your housing story is. And we know that your housing story is deeply personal to you. It's literally shelter, right? And we know that it determines your stability, it determines wealth building, and we know that it means a lot of things to a lot of people and plays different roles in our lives. So your housing story is a way to share a bit about how your own personal experience with housing impacts and shapes how you think about housing policy and the needs moving forward. So Devin, we're gonna start with you, and then we'll pass it down the line.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming this evening, and thank you, Abundant Housing, for putting this candidate forum together. My name is Devin Barrington Ward, and I am from the city of Atlanta. I've been a community organizer and a policy professional working here for the better part of 17 years. And what really shapes my housing story is my lived experience. You're looking at someone who has survived homelessness, to actually know what it's like to be on the street, to have no place to go. In fact, at the worst point of my housing journey, the 24-hour FedEx Kinko's, it's no longer 24 hours, but the 24-hour FedEx Kinko's in the Equitable building in downtown Atlanta is where I would find refuge and shelter at times. But I was able to take that experience and I used that to inform the ways that I've supported and worked directly on housing. And that's been inclusive of making sure that people, including LGBTQ folks, have shelter. In Washington, D.C., I was one of the first people to make sure that there was funding for LGBT youth shelters in the city of Washington, D.C., because at the point there was no dedicated funding for those folks. And I used my lived experiences to inform that policy. So that's a part of my housing story. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your interest in our forum this afternoon. My name is Nicole Evans-Jones, and my housing story is, I'll start with where it ended. I live now in a multifamily housing, so I am living the abundant housing dream, and it is a blended neighborhood with single-family homes and then also townhomes. I started my housing story when I came home from the hospital with my parents 57 years ago, and they still live in that home at 85 and 87. And in between, it was extremely stable until I divorced about a decade ago. And then I was challenged to find housing that I could afford and that my kids would be safe and comfortable in. So for about a 2-year period, we moved about 3 times, at one point even living with my parents. So that is something that makes it very personal to me. I also have a son that has a young family, and they are looking for housing. So how it has affected me, or housing affects me, it's multi-generational. And so it's super important to me that everyone has an opportunity to live the American dream and have shelter. That's a basic need and right. So I'm glad to be here today.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ishay Collins, and I too am born and raised here in Atlanta, and my housing story is multidimensional as well. I grew up in the East Atlanta neighborhood, in the East Atlanta East Lake community at the corner of Glenwood and 2nd Avenue, and there was 4 homes on the back end of the golf course in which we lived in a 3rd home for most of my childhood. And I'll never forget the landlord letting my mom know, who was a single mom at that time, raising 4 children of her own, and then also other relatives. He decided to sell his home, in which we were actually displaced, but it gave my mother the opportunity to relocate us to further into DeKalb. I would continue to live in Atlanta, matriculate through college, taught in Atlanta public schools, and then I myself, when I became an attorney, I was working in DC at that time, and that was at the time of the Great Recession, so that was like 2008, 2009, and my mother gave me the best advice at that time. She said, if you ever want to be a homeowner in Atlanta, now is the time. And so I came back home and purchased my home where I live now in Southwest Atlanta, in the Prince of Lakes community in Deerwood. And so my housing story is one of being a child moving and being displaced, but also being a young professional at the time, being able to take advantage of home ownership at a critical time where it was truly affordable and understanding what that trajectory looks like and experienced it on my own. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Connor. My housing story begins when I was a child born in Macon, Georgia. Soon after, my parents moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. My father was a truck driver, and so we were in HUD housing. It was one of the apartment complexes down from North Little Rock High School off of Geyer Springs Road. We were there for about 4 years, and I remember being a child and seeing the struggles, even with those who were given the benefit of HUD housing, just how other expenses would encroach, and sometimes landlords weren't actually doing what they were supposed to. And I remember as a child thinking, if I was this person in this situation, I would be much different. And as I fast forward into my early 20s, I had to take on 3 jobs in Atlanta in order to afford an apartment complex. My first one off of Euclid Avenue, which was a studio apartment, and my second one was off of 4th Street. Now we have renters on the northwest side of Atlanta, and we are $700 less than what is being charged with rent because we're trying to help those stay in their houses instead of give in to these higher prices. But it is difficult because our property taxes have gone up threefold, but we're trying to keep it going and keep the rent low so that we can keep people in their houses and keep them in the neighborhoods that they were raised in so that they won't have to leave the city and then bus in for their local job.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm DeJuan Robinson. I'm actually born and raised here. My birth certificate say Grady to Bowen Homes. So if you're talking about housing, I grew up in public housing. I'm the only one up here that grew up in public housing that knows what it feels like. I'm the only one that caught the MARTA bus when it was 15 cents. I also caught the MARTA train. So we're going to talk about housing. We need to be honest about it. You don't have to be in office to speak up against these things. I've been speaking up for this for the last 4 years. I helped the Bowen get the $40 million choice grant that I think we're going to break ground in November. We got to stop allowing these friends down at City Hall to say affordable housing. Nobody has identified that. We have people that work for the city of Atlanta making $15 an hour, $20 an hour. If you make $15 an hour, your rent should be $700. If you make $40,000 a year, it should be $1,000. We should not be going along with the affordable housing. This same council down there gave the house owners 30 years tax-free abatement for the Gulch project. We cannot allow that. Who do you trust at the end of the day to speak out against the mayor, cabinet, and city council to make sure that we are not giving away tax-free abatement to billionaires, and who's going to stand on the business of the citizens of Atlanta?
What do you see as the root cause of Atlanta's housing challenges? And why are these challenges becoming more severe? We're actually going to start with Nicole and then wrap around from here.
Yeah, I would say that the root cause, it obviously starts with jobs and an ability for people to have the types of jobs that they need to have affordable housing. I think that also there's a lack of housing. I think we all know that there was a period where affordable housing was not built in the city, and then there's just not an inventory of housing. But as a career educator, I know that education plays a role in it, opportunity plays a role in it, all of those things that create barriers to home ownership. And the second part of the question, I know I don't have a lot of time.
The second part was, why are these challenges becoming more severe?
Yes. I think I answered that part. Thank you.
Oh, just going around this way. Yeah, definitely. I'll also piggyback. I definitely think the root cause is in terms of the lack of addressing the diversity of what we're experiencing in Atlanta, based on income, based on education, based on truly leaning in and defining not only what is affordable, but being very important of pushing against the status quo of what has already been defined as affordable. And so there are ordinances and laws that are in the books to say that affordable housing is 15%, it is at least 15%. That's not enough. And so part of the root cause is the fact that we have not embraced the diversity of this city and developed a diverse portfolio of housing that really address the needs of everyone in this community. And the reason why it is exacerbating is because we have not, at the leadership level and also on the ground, really worked the plan to address that. So as we are giving more abatements and more tax incentives to building what we deem affordable housing, it's not enough. And also, again, the stock of inventory isn't diverse enough. So we're seeing housing that is for one bit or a single person or a studio, but the growth in Atlanta and the numbers that we've seen clearly tells us that affordable housing needs to be built for at least a family of 4, and we don't have enough of that in our current inventory to address it.
Okay, I would say the root cause of the housing crisis starts always with the tax. And the reason why I say that is because if you're a property owner and your taxes go up, then you have to charge the renter more money. And this is what we see happening all throughout the city. And it also doesn't help that most of the constituents bear a large portion of the taxes when it comes to property, because a lot of these larger corporations and companies that can afford their property tax go to the city to beg for TADs and abatements so that they can go 15 to 30 years without having to pay a property tax. And then they move people in from other states like New York or California, and then that takes away jobs from those who have been in Atlanta and helped to build Atlanta into the great city it is today. And I can say this, and one of my biggest worries is we are known as being the civil rights capital of the world. And when we see that the trajectory of our city is changing, and we're looking at a population that's going from a traditional black city into transports from all over the United States, then you're going to see property taxes go up, values go up, and people priced out. And people are leaving these other states, and they're going to come here and do the same thing. So we need to actually protect our citizens that have put their hard work, sweat, and equity in Georgia for many, many years, and have them have those lower property taxes so that they can pay a cheaper rent. I think these are very, very important things we need to look at.
So one of the root causes, Dr. Nikki's from here like myself. She's actually from here. So she know in 1996 when the Olympic came, that was the first start of putting black people out of public housing. Clark Howard Project was the first project in America. So they put them out because they wanted the Olympics to look nice. They didn't want the people down there. It was a trickle-down effect. So what happens is City Council and the Mayor's Office has the power to say, we're not going to give you a permit if you don't make these affordable. It's that simple. All the other rhetoric, it sounds good. APS is the biggest landowner in the city of Atlanta, right? So between APS and Atlanta Housing is the biggest landowner. Well, APS probably number 2. However, you got the city of Atlanta operates on a $2 billion budget. APS probably 1.7. There's no communication there. There's no collaborative effort to make sure that we hold folks accountable. When they wanted to shut down the hospital, the mayor put in a moratorium that wouldn't allow them to get a permit to build a high-rise. You can do the same thing when Google come here. You can do the same thing when Microsoft come here. So when you open up that can and say, I'm gonna do it right here, then you gotta do it everywhere because you have the power to. Council has the power to do that. However, leadership has failed us. We have to do something different down there because it's that simple. We have the power to do it down on 55 Trinity, and you guys need to vote somebody that have the willingness to do it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh, Devin again. Oh.
Don't leave me out. So it's a couple of things. I think one, we don't have zoning laws that allow for us to have a diversity in housing stock, right? Currently, there's only 60% single-family homes. Then you have apartments, and then there's nothing in between. So we're not building enough in-between housing, which is duplexes, other forms of housing that we see in other communities and other cities that meet their housing needs. A lot of people don't know this, but basement apartments in Atlanta, for example, are not legal. And some of these basement apartments are nicer than the new apartments they're building downtown. I think another issue is that income is too low. The majority of renters in the city of Atlanta are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. How are you supposed to be able to save? How are you supposed to be able to eventually buy a home when all of your disposable income is being eaten up by your housing expenses because rent has gotten so high? It is also a tax issue. I think Amber is right. We've just recently, Fulton County Development Authority gave Microsoft a $75 million tax break. Elon Musk got a $10 million tax break. $2 billion tax breaks for the Gulch. We're giving away money that we could be using to build affordable housing on those 363 acres of land that the city of Atlanta owns. And so when we don't have that money to invest in public housing, to invest in affordable housing, the people of Atlanta suffer. But it's ultimately a leadership issue. Because the fact of the matter is there's too many members of council who are in bed with developers. If you go through and you look at their disclosures, you see that a lot of these people are owned by developers. I've taken a pledge to take no corporate developer money. And I think that that's important for leadership around affordable housing.
Thank you all. So we're going to start this one with Ishay, and as we transition to this question and the questions upcoming, the questions are getting juicier and juicier, so we ask that you be mindful of time so we can all get everyone's questions together. So speaking of council, we know that you all are running to finish out the last year of a 4-year term, a little bit untraditional for a city council election. So because you all are running to finish out the last year of a 4-year term, you are coming into a current city council administration. How would you rate the current council's performance on implementing solutions to the challenges that you've identified? And for this question, I may pick on you a little bit for part 2 to your answer.
I'm sorry, say the last part.
I might give you a part 2 to your answer depending on.
Okay. And so you say, how do you rate city council on the solutions on the current issues that we identified with the last question in terms of housing? Yes, there's a lot more work that city council can actually do, and I think some of my colleagues on the panel emphasized the need of really leaning into legislation, but also enforcing legislation. I definitely think city council can do more and push more in increasing the percentage, mandating the increased percentage of affordable housing that developers are mandated to actually develop. And I think there has been a rub in regards to that piece because of the fact there are conversations that are, I do think that there may be conversations that are happening, or there may be commitments that have been made. And so I think it is important coming on to this last year of this term is really truly to push the more innovative piece of what affordability should look like, and also taking advantage of the opportunity of where we currently are with a comprehensive plan and those conversations that are happening to really lead the conversation and reset the conversation on what affordability truly is and what that means. And so I do think there's some more work that City Council can do in this space, but also understanding that this seat is one of 15, and so it is truly collaborating and leaning in to where those hot spots throughout the entire city that we can truly lean in and addressing affordability from a diversity perspective of what our city is actually experiencing. Well, this way. Yes.
Okay, so when I look at what City Council is doing, I know that their heart is in the right place and they're working hard for us citizens. I think the bigger issue is we live in a social media age. And in social media, everything is the hottest pick with the coolest person, and look at our grand city. But what you don't see are the realistic pictures of what is actually going on. And I think it would be good to advocate for our city council to meet with real individuals when they are approached by bigger companies and other corporations and business entities that come in, and they show them a wonderful proposal, and they tell them how much money the city is going to make with it, and then they have them sit down with people throughout the city, and those people asking questions If you're here, what does that do for transportation? How many employees will you have here? We have a large disconnect with the way that cities are built and are run versus the people who live in them. And I think there needs to be more conversation between the two. Thank you.
So I have a follow-up question there, and if we could have you give us 15 additional seconds for this question. I want you to zoom in a little bit more on legislation and what policy changes or policy you feel like is happening in City Council that could be implemented.
I would say that we as people should be able to vote on a TAD or an abatement concerning what entity is asking, and those things should be readily available online, where you can see what that business or corporation, what their proposal is, what their bottom line is, what they're offering for the city, and they're very transparent. And it's not something that's done into the wee hours of the night where they're, wrangling numbers while we're all unaware until we see the vote, and then we see what comes down the pike later. So I think it's just more of an involvement in that process of who gets the benefits and who does not.
Two pieces of legislation that sticks out to me is that I would like to have seen council come together and allow the votes to be counted when it came to the signatures involving the training facility piece. I would have liked to see legislation to engage the public on that. And City Council allowed the developer of the Gulch project to buy themselves out of affordable housing. They cut the city, I think, a $25 million check. So you don't even have to discriminate against minorities because you can buy yourself out of affordability and what they call affordability. So if AMI in Atlanta is $103,000, but for blacks in Atlanta it's $28,000, I don't have to discriminate against you. You don't make enough to live in my building anyway. We gotta be serious about that and hold them accountable for that. So that's what I'm saying. When you born and raised and live here and you understand that Atlanta is #1 in America for income inequality, Buckhead in Midtown is $96,000, Bankhead and Simpson Road in Cleveland Ave, $16,000. That's a problem. Everything is going up in the world except for salaries. That's a problem. But the people at the airport and around City Hall continue to get six-figure raise, but the lower level people are not getting no help. We have a high working homeless class in the city of Atlanta that needs to be addressed. Those are the type of legislation that need to be addressed and handled, and it can be. And we need to make sure that one of the five of us hold each other accountable and do that, because it has not happened. And if I had to give City Council a grade, it would be a C grade. You know what I'm saying? That's for the overall council. We got some council members I would give an A, but overall, the average would be a C.
Thank you.
So yeah, I will start off. I agree with DeJuan. I think a C. We're down there often enough where I feel like we can give an accurate grade. But I know we got a professor, a principal, and a former teacher on here, so maybe y'all could give more accurate grades. But I give them a C for a couple of reasons. One, I haven't seen any leadership on these zoning laws. I think people have been hesitant to do the hard work to show leadership around the zoning laws. Part of the reason why we have this lack of affordable housing is we don't have enough diverse types of housing for the people who live here currently and the people who want to live here. We can't put our heads in the sand. Atlanta is a hot city. We do influence everything. People are coming here, but they've got to come here and be good neighbors. I'm not anti-development, but I'm anti-development that takes advantage of people. For example, when Microsoft said they wanted to come here and they were going to build over by Grove Park, we got no details on the plan. We had nothing that we could hold them accountable to. I believe that is deserving of a C grade. In addition to that, when we're giving away these large tax incentives and tax abatements, either through Invest Atlanta or the Fulton County Development Authority, City Council's not sending any communication to these board members to say, we're not on board with that. And then, how can you have a high grade on affordable housing when so many of them are bought and sold and owned by corporate developers in the city? Who's gonna make a pledge up here to not take any corporate development money? I've made that pledge.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the leadership around the zoning. I think that is enforcing, for sure, is something that we need to work on. And then passing laws or legislation that is not being enforced, and it is not working, like the short-term rental, things like that that are not as important, but it ends up being legislation, and then it's not enforced. Less than half of the people with short-term rentals are registered. So it just seems like the priorities need to be more around housing flexibility. And I think that we need to have someone on council that is pushing for that, that is experiencing that, or has experienced it, and the benefits of it. And I think that is something that I could do.
Thank you all. We are going to start with Amber on this question and then rotate around. So each of you in one of your questions have mentioned the importance of community engagement in your potential role as a city council person. And as we all know, communities are not monolithic, right? They're not one and the same. And we also know that often neighbors disagree about what needs to happen on the neighborhood level and beyond. In addition to that, our community engagement processes often encourage opposition and disagreement rather than proactively planning for the future of our city. And we want to make sure that rather than reacting to a specific proposal, we're envisioning positive change on the bigger scale for our futures. So can you all please provide an example where you helped a community engagement process that shifted the narrative from disagreement or apprehension to successfully building excitement or comfort around a change that was coming?
Yes, so in our neighborhood, we pushed for neighbors who struggled with getting their children books and resources. We encourage them to build little libraries and to share books, as well as my husband and I are master gardeners, and we push for community gardening. But also I joined Stop the Gulch a while back and helped Buckhead meet with Bankhead so that we would all come together as a force of nature to push back against the city council allowing a 30-year TAD or abatement to cause us further property tax hikes. And we're still dealing with that, and we pushed the Gulch from a 30-year abatement down to a 15-year. We still weren't happy with that. We're not going to be happy with that. And since then, they've actually changed their outline and their proposals for what they wanted for the Gulch. So if you look at community activism and working together in groups and making sure that you meet with people in other areas of the city, it is a stronger force to get your voice heard. And I think we could do best by not being divided and come together where we have a lot more in common than we actually understand that we do.
So just for reference, with growing up in Bowen Homes, which was the biggest voting block in the city of Atlanta, you gotta think I'm one of the 4 living children that was in the daycare in 1981 that they say blew up, but we say it was bombed. So Atlanta means something more different than me, I'm saying probably anybody up here. So when you talk about community, LaTonya Gates is in the crowd that runs Paul Kids. I've been volunteering with them for the last 5 years. And when you're talking about the black kids in the inner city over there on Bankhead that doesn't have a true quality of life experience. So when I grew up in Bowen Homes, we thought Whitewater and Six Flags was everything. That's all we had. So volunteering with LaTonya that doesn't get any city grants, any county grants, and the community kept pushing her to apply for this, apply for that. She have friends in Buckhead that, I don't know if you want me to say this, but it's public knowledge, they donate about $3 million a year for black kids to go out of the country, pay for the passport, to go out of the country every year, to go cross states. And we put together this first event this past Saturday from Buckhead to Bankhead, where we walked about 8 miles and we brought together builders that built Punt City Market, rich families that have generations over there that tell us, oh, back when my grandmother was alive, blacks were not allowed here, but it's a different day now. And they pour the money into the black community. And now we're able to give these kids a true quality of life. They built houses over there. They give them rent for $1,000, 3 and 4 bedrooms, $1,000, where the neighborhood was pushing against it. But we steadfast, and through her relationship with Westside Church, And the rich and wealthy in Buckhead, we now have brought that together with Bankhead that allow these resources to pour into the inner city with no city involvement. And I think that that's a tremendous thing.
Thank you. One example, well, first, I am a community organizer. That's what I do. I was born a community organizer, let my mama tell it, and I'll die a community organizer. And so when you're a community organizer, in order to do that, you have to master the art of the one-on-one. In one of my organizations that I was in, you had to do 31 one-on-ones a month, and if it was Black History Month, you were in trouble. But with that being said, one of the areas where I've organized is, how many people are familiar with 311 and PAD, Policing Alternatives Diversion Initiative? I was proud to be one of the consultants on the citywide expansion of PAD, and so we held several town hall meetings and listening sessions and focus groups across the city to develop the protocols for how people would access these diversion alternative services. So that way, when we see people who are suffering from extreme poverty or substance abuse or mental health challenges, that we can get them the support that they need rather than just locking them up. One of the challenges that we have with that program, though, is that housing is one of the main things that people need. And so I want to be on the city council so that I can continue to support PAD. Right now, PAD is only funded to operate Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We need them to be 24 hours because we know the need in Atlanta is great. And so I was proud to be able to help expand that across the city with law enforcement and members of the community. So that's an example I can provide you.
I have a follow-up for that because
Yes.
I think that that's a good example. I am curious about where you were able to navigate disagreement within making that happen, particularly with the amount of one-on-ones and community engagement that you mentioned. How are you able to navigate opposing opinions to be able to move that agenda forward?
I think it's important that we inform people. One of the most important jobs of an elected official is to educate the public. And I think oftentimes we don't do ourselves a good service when we aren't educating and providing people the facts. And so one of the ways that we deal with disagreement is we provide folks the facts. Some people were concerned that maybe diversion shouldn't just be handled by 311 and that the police should be the only folks that are involved in making these diversions. And so what we recognized is we needed to provide data that showed that unfortunately many of our police officers in the city of Atlanta weren't making those diversions. What we have seen now that the public is available to engage in those diversion services is that we've seen an uptake in the use of PAD. And now we see the need for PAD to be funded 24 hours now that it's back in the hands of the citizenry. And so we navigated that disagreement by letting people express themselves, right? And letting people ask questions, and then also providing people with the facts. Data is really important, and a lot of times we want to bulldoze through projects, bulldoze through proposals, and we don't inform people with the facts and educate people and allow them to ask questions and respond.
I would definitely agree with that. As a former principal and then also a counselor, one of the things, obviously trained to listen, but working in the school system, you're forward-facing. You are doing constituent services every day, all day. When people come to talk to you, you can't limit them to 2 to 3 minutes of their opinions about what's happening. And so with that, I think it's super important that we are engaged in the community. And as a citywide seat, that's all the communities. We're signing up for that, and we need to be held accountable for that. One example that I can give, working in Kirkwood at the time in 2009, it was the fastest gentrifying neighborhood in the country. And we were up for closure twice because we were under enrolled. And I had to go before the board twice to say, I'm here, I'm in the community. I see the playground after school. I see the soccer field on Saturdays and Sundays, and it is filled with kids, 1, 2, 3. And I am proud of that fight. And now we have a 4-year-old center in that area, and the school is thriving and just went through a remodel. So part of it is just being visible, understanding, being accessible, and then being strategic with getting the work done.
Yes, I think a couple of my colleagues touched on an extremely important point with community engagement. The importance of it is to be accessible, responsive, and also using it as an opportunity to educate. For the last 10 years, I've served on the Atlanta Board of Education. Of 6 of those years, I've served in board leadership as vice chair and chair of the board. And I shared my housing story growing up in East Atlanta, but also living in Southwest Atlanta. And what we experience, what most people don't talk about often, is that there is a 48% mobility rate in this city, meaning that our families start at one point, at 48% of our families live in one part of the city at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the calendar year, they're in another part of the city or not living in the city at all. And one of the aspects when you think about the school system and how it plays a part in the ecosystem of stabilizing this city was to ensure that we also, as a school system, design our cluster, what we call our cluster plan, to ensure that each one of our clusters throughout the city had a stable educational network. And so I started that advocacy my earlier years on the board, where I was in a high transiency area living on the south side of the city and bringing the entire community together through town halls, through actual going out to neighborhood association, NPUs, apartment complexes, door knocking, canvassing the entire gamut to engage as many families as we needed to engage to gather input on what the educational landscape would look like for them and what will it take to stabilize that so they themselves can be in a stable community and keep their children in our schools so we could in fact end that mobility pipeline. It's reduced, is not completely solved, but we're in a much better place because of that effort and leading on the school system side. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you all. Before we transition to the next question with the panelists, I want to remind everyone that you all got note cards with a pencil to be able to ask questions. So start thinking about your questions now. I have a couple more questions for the panelists here. But when you're done with your questions, look for our volunteer, Allison, who introduced us, and she'll be taking questions as you write them down. So don't forget about your questions as we're going. We're going to keep going. So this next question, we're going to start with Devon and then circle back around to Devin and moving down the line as normal. And we are going to be talking about housing and affordability, one of our favorite topics, right? And when people talk about housing and affordability, we're often talking past each other, right? Because we're using these terms, we're using these signs, and one of the main questions that we hear often in community is affordable to who, right? And we know that housing impacts all of us, so we're going to be asking specific questions about some of the groups that are impacted by housing challenges. And those groups are going to be folks experiencing homelessness, legacy residents, and those in the middle in need of lower cost market options, okay? So we're going to start with homelessness, and then I'll ask about the subsequent groups as we go, all right? So the question in relation to this is, what will you do to accelerate development of affordable housing options like the Melody and the Ralph David House for people who are experiencing homelessness in Atlanta?
Great question. I see Commissioner Khadija, Chief of Staff, back there. Homelessness is actually a county issue. So happened the city put their nose in it, but it's a county problem. That's part of what Devin said when you're talking about the communication. There's no communication. That's a county issue when it comes to homelessness. They have way more money than the city, but nobody has the leadership and the galls to go over there and say, hey, we need to collaborate because you guys got the money over there. What are we doing for this? See, when the city put their nose in the business, then it becomes a city problem. But the homelessness is a county issue because it's a health issue, which is a county issue. So we need to start holding everybody accountable and putting them at the table first and foremost. So that is what we need to start doing.
Can you speak a little bit more to policy options that you may introduce to the county level as you're bridging that gap between the city and the county?
So whatever property the city owned, I think we used to own Peachtree and Pine, right? We gave that away. And that was a homeless shelter place. So most of the people we know are facing mental health issues. So from a legislative standpoint, I don't know if we can mandate the county to do that, right? However, there needs to be a relationship with city funds and county funds. So from a legislative standpoint, I don't know. But from whatever property we have in the city, we can house the homeless there and have funds to be put there to treat them with the mental health issues and other issues that they're facing But from a health standpoint and a homeless standpoint, we need to be partnered with our friends over at the county and get the funds to treat our people, our homeless people. But from a City of Atlanta standpoint, we don't have to pass legislation. We just need to tell them, hey, this business is going to be for the homelessness, and we're going to use the funds to treat them. I mean, we give PAD and Partners for Home $3, $4, $5 million a year to treat the homelessness, but nobody want to go down there and say, PAD, what have you done with this $4 million? Partner for Homes, what have you done with these $5 million that the City of Atlanta have given you? Let's show and prove that first.
Thank you. We'll pass it to Devin.
Respectfully, as a formerly unsheltered person, I didn't care if the county or the city handled the issue. I just wanted it handled, and I believe that that is what most of the people who are unsheltered would like. There's a couple of things around homelessness. One, we have to pair homelessness services with mental health services, because a lot of times you have folks who are unsheltered who are also living with an unaddressed mental health need, and you have to be able to consent to the housing. And so if you're not in a place mentally where you can consent to the housing, I can't get you housed. And so that's one. One of the things that I proposed recently at the City Council was that we establish a mental health crisis emergency response fund, because unfortunately in Georgia, we have not expanded Medicaid. And so because of that, there's no one to pay for these mental health services for the unsheltered population. So it's not just a housing issue, it's also a health issue. But on the housing piece, I would like us to adopt a model that's similar to what Washington, D.C. did, which is a decentralized homeless shelter model, which is the reason they did that was because we oftentimes are pushing up against not in my backyard. I just met with a group of neighbors in the West End who were very annoyed that it seems like all of the shelters, all of the group housing comes to their community, and why can't we spread the responsibility across the city? So what I would propose is the decentralized model, which would make sure that there are shelters in all 12 council districts, so no one community is overburdened by the responsibility of caring for the unsheltered. And we can do that on the 363 acres of land that the city owns. I think at least half of that land needs to be dedicated to making sure that there is a variety of housing for the unsheltered population in the city of Atlanta, and we have the funds to do that.
Thank you. I agree with you regarding the preventative approach and the mental health care crisis that we're all facing across the country. And I know that the wraparound services are needed in addition to the housing. In addition to the temporary housing, we've got to address what happened to make the individual homeless or unhoused. And so in my previous career, my most recent career, right up the street at Young Middle School, we were the first to write a grant for wraparound services in the school. And when you ride through the neighborhood, many people think that's not a thing or it's not needed. But we have a gooder store, we are training, there's mental health services, there are physical health services, there are haircuts, all the things that make a person feel human. And I believe that the containers are a start. We have to start somewhere. But to Devin's point, also, I see the parks and recs centers being a way that we can do a little more and decentralize that assistance, because it's all around us, it's happening, and it's only gonna get worse if we continue to react to the unhoused population. We've got to prevent it.
So this, thinking about what Devin stated in terms of the decentralization, there is a diverse landscape of housing that support our unhoused. What we have not done is truly communicate what those options are and bring everyone to the table. Part of the solution and it goes beyond the Melody, which is only 40 units. It goes beyond some of the others, is truly thinking about what is transitional housing and support for our unhoused and our homeless, because it's not just the face of the single person with a mental health issue. It is families, it is young adults, and we're talking about young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 that may have phased out of foster, that may have phased out of foster care or are homeless on their own. So we need to have a more robust approach to what transitional housing looks like, but also stable, and moving them to stable housing that truly supports and address unhoused. And one of the last acts that I made sure to champion and was solidified before I rolled off as chair in January was, in fact, the land swap with the city to give the Cooper Street property, which is right, if you're familiar with 280, where 20 is, right on the other side of the Melody. There is land that APS actually owned, but we didn't have use for it because it's too small to build a school. It's too small to build a school, and we also have 2 other schools in that area. But we recognize the need to address the unhoused population, so we worked collectively with the city and collaborated with the city to do a land swap, which we gave the city the Cooper Street land in exchange for the land by Hope Hill Elementary that will provide more green space for our students. So I'll stop there. But that's an exact example of actually getting the work done and solving a problem that we currently have.
So I was there the night that Mayor Kasim Reed went to the church at the corner of Ponce de Leon Avenue and Charles Allen Drive. And he announced that night that they were going to close Peachtree and Pine. It was difficult to watch those that would be severely affected by that come to the acknowledgement of what are we going to do now. And at that time, there were promises made that there would be another facility twice as big in an area in which people that were shopping or visiting Atlanta were not complaining about people walking around homeless. And they made a lot of promises, and those promises were never fulfilled. And when you fast forward to where we are today, usually during the winter, we will pack up, supplies like comb, toothbrush, toothpaste, floss, protein bars. But we ended up, after handing those out, we had to add addresses for some of these homeless shelters, because you would ask the homeless person, do you know where you're staying tonight? And they would only know of one address of one homeless shelter. And I think another way that we can address homelessness that's very important are those that are serious about wanting to move past homelessness, that they are offered a free course that teaches them not only how to balance to open up a checking account, how to use your money whenever you have a job, and then put it towards such affordable housing in which it builds their credit, and it's a transition home, which they put down very little monthly, but it shows as they grow their savings and they learn how to budget, and we bring them into the world in which now they have hope, and now they have a deeper understanding of the best way to be able to accrue a better life. And I think that there's many ways that we can go about that, and giving them those tools are very important.
Thank you. Because I think that all of you have answered the question first at least once, I'm going to shake it up a little bit, and we'll start with Ishay and go around this way. The next question is in relation to our legacy residents. And the question that I have specifically is, what sources would you use to fund additional support for legacy residents that are facing rising property taxes and other pressures that are preventing them from remaining in their homes as legacy residents?
Great, yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So just really quickly, just a data set, 51% of your property tax base goes to fund schools. And so you think about the larger case in that in terms of increased property taxes that has been stated. Your property taxes are increasing because the value of your homes are increasing. The city and the district the city and the school system have not increased the millage rate. So for our legacy residents, what we have done and what we are doing and promoting is the use of our homestead exemptions. There is an increase that will be on the ballot this November 5th to support a higher homestead exemption for our seniors. So truly educating the community on that. That reduces the value of the home so that the tax tax percentage is collected lower. The second thing, I was just recently appointed to the Invest Atlanta board, so I haven't served on it with all the other things, but literally been serving on the Invest Atlanta board for the last 3 months. And one thing that we've championed that is also launching is freezing the property taxes for our legacy residents, 65 and older, for at least 20 years. We're in the pilot stage of that program now, where we had to raise $20 million for that. The application's in August 17th, and the second round will be launched. But those are the efforts where I recognize in protecting our legacy residents to be able to stay in their homes. The third thing on that, as a civil rights attorney, I constantly push as well, is for our heirs who own property or who now have taken on ownership for their legacy residents to also lean in and have that legal representation and assistance to help our legacy residents know how to fight and keep their homes, so they're not losing their homes over a $500 tax bill or something to that nature. So that's also providing the service. I am very clear, as a public servant, we are here to serve the public and to come out of our offices and our dioceses and really bring this issue, these issues and these opportunities to our community and help our legacy residents, because we're also dealing with the digital divide. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll pass the mic. Yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I do agree that there's an education piece that needs to be done with for our legacy residents. As I mentioned, my parents are 85 and 87, and they live in Southwest Atlanta, the same home that I grew up in. But with that said, they've been on a fixed income for a very, very long time. And they are not aware of the Affordable Housing Fund. You know, they are not aware of a lot of these options that are available to them to help with their property tax reductions. Many didn't know that property tax was, you know, a county thing, you know, function. And so I think that's a big piece, is letting everyone know what options they have. I do think too that with the property tax, there needs to be, with the school tax, we have legacy residents that are still paying, you know, the school tax. And, you know, they haven't had kids in school for a very, very long time. So there's some things out there that we can address. I just think we have to be strategic and look into it and innovative and see things that are happening in other cities and work together and have everyone around the table so that we can address the needs of our super important legacy residents.
Well, I have a follow-up question there, and we'll have 15 seconds for it. I'm curious about the potential funding sources and like where money may come in when it comes to in addition to the education piece, right? Yeah. When it comes to preserving legacy residents in their homes. Do you have any ideas on it?
Well, I know with this particular affordable fund, it is to be tied into the budget so that it is 2% of the budget by 2025. So that is a funding source. I would also be creative. We have a lot of people who take advantage of the city of Atlanta and then they drive back to where they live. And I think we can figure out a way to get some revenue there. So I think that we've got to be innovative. We got to look and see how other cities are doing it, and be steadfast to helping our legacy residents, all of our residents actually. Yes.
So I am supportive of homestead exemptions for seniors. I'm not supportive of devaluing people's property so that their property taxes are lower. I don't think that that's right, because the value of people's property is how particularly black residents build generational wealth. So I'm not supportive of that. What I am supportive of is making sure that we aren't giving Elon Musk a $10 million tax break, Microsoft a $75 million tax break, and the developers at the Gulch a $2 billion tax break. That is why people's taxes have gone up. None of the folks on city council, none of the folks on the school board went down to the Fulton County Development Authority and said enough is enough, but I did. I went down to the appraiser's office to say enough is enough because we've devalued the trophy properties downtown and in Midtown. There was a property on Ponce that sold for $90 million, but on the tax rolls, it was listed for $9 million. So that means there was $81 million in additional value that we didn't tax. And so that additional money could be used to offset the taxes of seniors and legacy residents and folks who are struggling to stay in their home. The other piece is I think we need to update our zoning laws to allow for cottage-style homes, basement apartments, and assisted dwelling units, because particularly in this part of the city, there are a lot of older residents who have larger homes with basement apartments that would love to be able to reduce their housing costs and offer up another housing opportunity for a young family. But right now, the law doesn't allow that. And so we need an update in the zoning laws. And just really quickly, our state doesn't allow a commuter tax. So unfortunately, we can't tax people coming inside of the city of Atlanta. As much as they may extract and use services, the state doesn't allow that. We might be able to consider including that in our legislative package as the city of Atlanta to the state, but currently that's not allowable under state law.
Well, Devin, you wasn't the only one. I ran for Fulton County Tax Commissioner this spring. You know what I'm saying? Which is the most devastating seat when it comes to black people getting put out of their homes, is coming from the Fulton County Tax Commissioner seat. So I wouldn't say you're the only one. So when it comes to that, like what you're saying is that one of the issues is that oftentimes people have bright ideas when they run for office. So when I graduated, came back home from college in 2002, I've been on the ground. So we have a board member here that says that now that she's on the board and Invest in Atlanta, they want to propose this freeze tax. However, our senior citizens should have been stopped paying 50% property tax. That's what's killing them the most. 50% property tax, 25 city, 25% county. It should have been that. She was the chair for quite a while. We should have been stopped that, or at least proposed that we stop that, right? So when you get on the board and Invest in Atlanta, which Tyler Perry just gave Invest in Atlanta $2 million for our seniors' property tax. Where did that money go? It didn't go to our seniors. Invest in Atlanta get a lot of money, make a lot of promises, and then they say they hire consultants to help them distribute the funds. That's not fair. We've been saying that for far too long. So Invest in Atlanta have the mayor sits on the board. He appoint 2 or 3 people. Do you think he's going to appoint 2 or 3 people that's going to oppose him? No. So I'm just saying, so kudos if she want to say her appointment Invest in Atlanta, but does it mean anything for us when it has not meant anything for us in the past? Is it going to mean something different now? We got people, like I said again, Tyler Perry, who donate millions of dollars, and so do other people. Our seniors do not get it. We want to run our seniors when we want to vote. I'm the only one that been there from day one advocating for our seniors. When they need a tree cut out their backyard, we raise the money to cut down that tree.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we are going to move forward. Amber.
Okay, when discussing legacy residents, it has been very difficult to watch some of our neighbors who are older struggle with their property taxes. Many over on the west side, we've watched people who have been in that neighborhood for over 40 years not be able to pay their taxes, have to leave their home, and end up being a renter in that same neighborhood. As a homeowner and a rental property owner, we went from 4 years ago, the rental property that was about $800 a year for property taxes is now at $3,000 a year and $586 a year for the trash taxes. That doesn't count the property insurance. So if you wonder why rent is going up and you're wondering why legacy owners are leaving, it's because the constituency is dealing with a bigger entity or a McMansion that's built beside them, and everyone's home in that neighborhood goes up. No matter if you live in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house that's over 50 years old, your property tax will go up to match that big home. So I think it's best to, if it's a newer build, then go off of that property tax for that newer build. But for homes that have been there and families that have been there for a long time, there should definitely be a freeze, and it should go no more than 3% per year. But because property taxes have raised so much in the past, there should be an absolute freeze to any raising of our property taxes for at least 5 years, because so many people are struggling, and I think it's nonsense that every year after they did an extreme raise 2 years ago, that they just keep tacking on each year, acting like 3% is nothing, when it is an extreme amount and putting stress on many, many people in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. All right, can we give a hand to our panelists? At this point, we're going to transition to the audience Q&A, and I'm going to pass the questions to Allison.
All right. So first we have, oh, thank you. Just give me the seat. Excellent. You know, we've talked a lot about affordability, but and capital A affordable housing, right? So subsidized housing. But of course, most folks don't qualify for affordable housing, and we certainly cannot subsidize our way out of our challenge. And just this isn't on the card, so I'm going to use some moderator privileges. But in Fulton County, a median income household makes 70% of the money that they need to afford a median priced home. That's Fulton County, not the city, but you know. So what will you all do to accelerate the development of these these missing middle homes, the kinds of homes that are more affordable and attainable for folks in the middle and don't qualify for affordable housing? So who did we start with last time? So we can start with. Let's start with Nicole.
Okay. I think we just need to build more of it. I think as we talk about that, not in my backyard, I think we need to show examples where it has been successful, where we can have housing flexibility within neighborhoods. I know most residents in the city of Atlanta have single-family homes, and so it's been really, really hard to get that push to have multi-family homes like duplexes and triplexes and townhomes and all of that. But I think if you show the model, I think people will be less hesitant for that. I mentioned that I live in a neighborhood that has single-family homes. It's blended. There's single-family homes, and then there are also multi-family homes. And people, particularly on the south side of Atlanta, who are not as aware of that model, are less hesitant. And when they come visit, they're like, this is an option, and it can work. But you fear what you don't know. And so I think it gets back to that education piece, so that we show successful models and highlight that.
Devin.
So I'm one of those people in the middle, right? I make more money than my parents made when they purchased their home, but my wife and I, between student loan debt and high interest rates and how much money is needed for a down payment, we can't purchase a single family home right now in this market. And that's a lot of millennials and Gen Zers. And Atlanta is a young city. And so many of the people who are in that missing middle are Gen Z and millennials who are trying to figure out, how am I going to survive in this city? How am I going to build wealth? I think one of the things is, again, this update in our zoning laws. Our zoning laws really handcuff us to the type of housing that can be approved in the city of Atlanta. And I think when we have a more progressive zoning framework, we can diversify the type of housing that is available to people. And so when we have more housing stock that's available to people, then it drives prices down. Again, when there's more competition, when there's more options on the marketplace, then the prices go down. And so I think it's about, our main tool in that is the updating of our zoning laws. I think a secondary tool, again, the city owns 363 acres of land. I said half of those acres should be dedicated to eliminating our unsheltered problem here in the city of Atlanta. And the other half should be used to kind of address that need for the people in the missing middle through either single family, multiplex, duplexes, things of that nature.
Thank you. Let's go back to Dewan.
So unfortunately, this is not a zoning issue. AMI comes from HUD. We need to have Nakima Williams at the table. God bless the dead. We should have had John Lewis change this years ago, because that's a HUD thing. We are living off of Hall County, Gwinnett County, and DeKalb County make up the AMI. We cannot have folks on Bankhead and Simpson Road and Cleveland Avenue holding them to the bar of Hall County, Gwinnett County, Cobb County, DeKalb County. That is what's making up that AMI when you speak of the 70%. So Bankhead sits on the backside of Sandy Springs. Do you think the people of Sandy Springs make the same as people on Bankhead? No. So the AMI should not reflect that. But HUD has something to do with that. We need to have the people who makes the decision there stop being friends with them, because too many people are losing their lives, their home based on friendships. We don't have to call them out in a disrespectful manner, but we need to have a communication and say, hey, listen, you're up there in D.C., you need to make these changes because it's affecting so many people who vote for you. Here in Atlanta, we let people get away with too much because of friendship or whatever. But that AMI comes from HUD. It is not a zoning issue. It is clear-cut in the Kima Williams situation right now, and we need to address that because HUD makes up the AMI.
I agree with Devin that it does not look good for the millennials and Gen Z right now when they're looking at possibly ever owning a home. Now, it seems that economic-wise, it seems like our world is turning into just trying to make everyone a renter and not a homeowner, and like it's being forced upon us, and this is the time to act. And one of the things that I have been considering is pushing for our homeowners and those who own rental properties, if they are to give a livable rent and they're not price gouging and they keep it under market rate, that they get a tax deduction for doing so, and that allows the renter to save money monthly. So in the future, they have that down payment for home ownership. And I think if we start with small changes like that, for instance, we have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that the market price says we should be charging anywhere between $1,700 a month to $2,500 a month, and we charge $1,075 a month. And so we lose money on this, and it hurts us when property taxes come around, and when they raise it, we go down to City Hall and we go and complain to the commissioners. But the bigger issue is I think that there should be a tax deduction for helping people be able to have a livable rent so that then they can save up and obtain home ownership in the future. Oh, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that. So I know there's been a lot of mentioning of our zoning laws. I think what most people don't know is that our zoning laws are currently being rewritten as we speak. The last time our zoning laws were even revised were in the 80s, and so we're in that process now. It's more so about how we are all at the table to actually be a part of those conversations and push legislation and policy as your city council member to ensure that we are in fact passing regulations and deregulating spaces where we are able as homeowners to build a more diverse inventory of housing, which could be ADUs, assisted development units. We talked about duplexes, triplexes, basement apartments, freeing up and allowing us to increase our housing stock so we can in fact be more affordable. In terms of the AMI here, that is set by HUD. That's not the issue. The issue is increasing the percentage of AMI so that more families can, decreasing the percentage so that more families can in fact qualify for more affordability. And so we're leaning in truly having city leadership to be responsive in developing and supporting legislation, funding it, and also having a solid plan to sustain it and allow homeowners like all of us to be able to participate in affordability. Then that helps us increase our stock and be able to offer something to everyone in the city.
Thank you all. So for time, this next question, 30 seconds. Sorry, everybody. We'll start with, we started with you, so we'll start with Devin. So the city's tax allocation districts should start winding down in the next few years. If and when that happens, the city will see an influx of new tax revenue. What would be your priority for how to use that money?
Several priorities. I think one is making sure that we deal with the issue of the unsheltered. Again, moving forward that plan for the decentralized a shelter model that allows for shelter across all 12 council districts, so it's not just an influx in any given community. And I think that's also additional revenue that we can use to develop on that 363 acres of city-owned land.
I would also add infrastructure. I mean, particularly since we're here on Cascade today. I think that is somewhere where this administration has not given it enough thought or enough priority, and it's only going to get worse. We have a lot of people, we've talked about that, moving into the city. So I think infrastructure, we saw what happened with the water, but the roads, the sidewalks, some people can't even walk safely in their neighborhoods. So my priority would be to give some money to infrastructure.
Great, thank you. So what, in terms of the TADs, the TADs that you're speaking of that are getting ready to wind down are those spaces where development has been extremely lucrative. So that's the East Atlanta TAD, the Atlantic Station TAD, and a few others. Well, another thing, a lot of information that's not shared with the public is that we also have a Campbellton Road TAD. We have a Fort McPherson TAD. We have tax allocation districts in underserved communities that are getting pennies of a dollar in development. So as and I'm advocating for that as an appointed member on the West Atlanta board, not by the mayor, but by my colleagues on the school system side, what I am currently doing is advocating for, as we close out those TADs, that those dollars be moved to support development in underserved communities that help development, support our small businesses, help build infrastructure, and also thinking about more social enterprise allocation districts versus geographical, which has been on the books for 60 years. So that's what I would do.
When we talk about TADs, I don't know if they will ever end. The last time it was time for Atlantic Station to start paying, they requested an extension. So until, yeah, and until they stop asking for extensions, okay, and they don't allow any more of the extensions, then I'll believe that they will start paying their proper amount of property taxes. And when that happens, infrastructure is very important, but I also think rehabbing homes, that as long as there's not foundation problems, that we're able to help those who work within our city government that are struggling with homeownership, and those who we want community policing. We want our firemen right in the neighborhood. We want everyone who works within our neighborhood to live within our neighborhood. And I think if we rehab homes instead of leaving it to a large amount of investors, then some of that money can go to help those move right back into the neighborhoods. But I don't trust that these TADs will actually stop asking for extensions.
I love some of these intelligent answers by people that's been in office that have done nothing to fix the situation, but now that they run it, they got all these intelligent ideas. But like Dr. Nikki said, my first deal would be potholes in the streets and transportation money, because if I wasn't from here and can remember where the potholes are, my truck would have been dead years ago. Luckily, I know where this pothole is on this street and this street. You got to have a good memory to dodge these potholes. So transportation is where I think my first batch of money would go to fixing these roads that have been messed up since I was born here. We have had these issues with these potholes, so there would be the first place that my money would go.
Thank you. Dwan, we'll start with you, and again, we'll just do 30 seconds, sorry. But that was a great transition. We had quite a few questions about the connection between housing affordability and our car dependency, our lack of public transportation options, or very limited public transportation options in the city. We, of course, have bus rapid transit coming to some parts of town, but we also have a stalled development of rail on the Beltline. So given this connection between car dependency and affordability, what would be your priority public transportation focus?
The last part, what would be?
What's your priority kind of legislation or focus around public transportation? Or anything, actually, I'm gonna correct myself, public transportation or non-car mobility?
So MARTA is a partner of the city of Atlanta. So having a working relationship with MARTA, we gave MARTA their first big opportunity here under Maynard Jackson. So I just think having the right council there, establishing that relationship, because I think currently, I want to say about 10 MARTA stations, the bathrooms are still down from COVID. And we have a big issue with that. They want to fix them up and put the bright lights on there when the World Cup comes, because people getting off at Vine City right there. But everyday MARTA riders, so we have council members that have allowed routes to be stopped in certain districts. Nobody has spoken on that. I've been in transportation for the last 4 years speaking on these issues, riding the MARTA bus, having the MARTA and the council members try to pinpoint these issues. So the legislation would be, I don't think that the legislation can mandate MARTA because there's a working relationship with a separate entity. But we have too many former friends that sits on the MARTA board that allow conflict of interest to hold MARTA accountable. And we just got to do a better job of holding MARTA accountable.
Thank you. We'll go back this way.
So one, I remember when they pitched the Beltline, the Georgia Tech students, many, many years ago. I would think I was in middle school, and surprisingly, I was paying attention. But I think that we need to make good on the promise that we were told that there's going to be rail on the Beltline, and there needs to be rail on the Beltline. You can get a commitment from me that I'm not going to be approving any more projects on the Beltline until we see a plan for rail on the Beltline, period. I think the other piece of that is also the expansion of bus rapid transit. I was pleased to go to the meeting yesterday with Board Member Collins around the expansion of the bus rapid transit line on Campbellton Road. We want to prioritize that. They are applying for federal money, but I'm also committed to using those additional tax revenue sources. If the federal money doesn't come, we're not going to wait on anybody to save us. We'll pay for it ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I was there yesterday as well. The bus rapid transit could be a deal changer for us. If you go to other cities and other countries, there's a serious dependency on rapid transit, and unfortunately for us who grew up here, we don't trust MARTA. It doesn't come often enough. It doesn't take us close enough to where we want to go. We're walking a mile after we get off. And so I think that this is a good first step, and I do support it.
Yeah, I agree with what Dr. Nikki stated, and take it a step further. The biggest issue, because is the equity part of this. You have parts of the city where the accessibility of transit is rapid, it's on time, is very close, is homes, close to destination safe, but you don't have that in other parts of the city. And so I definitely think leaning into the transportation pieces, first off, is assuring that transportation options are easily accessible and mobile to everyone. If you look at the heat map that is out there, most of the jobs are in the central eastern northern part of this city. Our highest bus riders and use transportation is on the west and the south side of this city. So first we need to really invest into doing that by updating our transportation plan as a city that we haven't done, and city council can actually lean into that. Also, where we don't receive state funds for helping us with transit or even MARTA, I do think the city and city council can legislate more funds to support those non-mobile options like the electric bikes and some of those key pieces. 30 seconds isn't enough.
I know.
Yes, they are. Atlanta is blessed to have a gorgeous tree canopy. And because we care about our environment and we care about our trees, the more we talk about building, the more we talk about building roads and expanding roads, the less that we have of our beautiful tree canopy. So we always have to keep that in consideration. Number two, our city is growing exponentially with people who are coming from other states because they find our city very attractive, and I can see why, because it's gorgeous. What I would propose is that we have more park and ride parking lots. This is where there are different areas where people who may be driving in an area that want to catch a MARTA, they can park. It will lower the traffic on our local roads. And if we had multiple areas of park and ride for carpooling and for getting closer to the MARTA stop and not having to walk back and forth, because we have such a large city that it's hard to make transportation in the next 2 or 3 years as our city grows. So we need to look at other options as well.
That's it. Well, unfortunately we're out of time, so I do want to give everybody 30 seconds to close. Sorry. So Amber, we can start with you.
It was nice to talk with you guys today. I can tell that you have a lot more questions for us as candidates, and I hope that you go to our websites and you ask us any question that you need better and more detailed answers on. I'm sure all of us would be very happy to answer those questions. And as far as I'm concerned, and what I think about everybody else on this panel, we want the best for Atlanta. And that's why we stood up to actually run for city council. So I would really love to have your vote in November. And thank you for having me tonight.
Dewan.
As a native son, someone that's been in the trenches fighting for you for over 20 years, not when it's popular, not when it's campaign time, I think that I've earned your vote. 37,000 of you voted for me for Fulton County Tax Commissioner. I took on Arthur Fernand, who's been in seat, ripping us off for 28 years. I've taken on that fight. I've proven to you that even when I worked for Mayor Kasim Reed, I was at the podium speaking out against it when the community was treated unfairly. So I think that I've earned your vote. I think it means something when you have fourth generation people that's born and raised here, and we care about the community. I'm one of the only candidates that have always fought for gay, straight, black, brown, and I would like to continue to fight for you, or whether I'm elected or not. My fight doesn't stop, and you can find me at www.electdrdewanrobinson.com.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Listen, Atlanta deserves a fighter, and I've been a fighter. Atlanta deserves a community organizer, and I've been a community organizer. Atlanta deserves a better city leadership down at City Council, and I'm a part of that better leadership. I have proven myself time and time again that I show up for the fights that many people do not show up for. And I do it when people are looking, and I do it when people are not, because it's the right thing to do. I'm so excited to be taking this journey because I found out I'm going to be a father. And this is bigger than just me. This is bigger than just me. This is about a next generation of another Atlantan that will call Atlanta home. And so I'm proud to be building that legacy here in the city of Atlanta. Visit my website, devonforatlanta.us, and I'll be here afterwards to answer any of your questions that were unanswered.
Thank you all for being here tonight and making this a priority for you. I have all it's hired based on the knowledge, skills, and the disposition for the work, right? And so the knowledge is something you can kind of guess. You can look at past work history. You can look at experience, all of that. The skills are something that we will all develop on the job. There's no incumbent in this race, so no one has done this work. We're all proposing what we would do and what we plan to do and would love to get done. But the disposition piece is very important. I am a bridge builder. I have a history of gaining trust, working with divergent teams and trains of thought and coming to consensus. Because a lot of times what happens, people are saying very similar things, they're just not listening. They are not listening to the other's point of view. We've got too much work to do in this city not to have someone that can build relationships and move our agendas forward. Thank you. I'm at Nicole Evans-Jones for Atlanta.com. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity, and thank you so much for Abundant Housing Atlanta for hosting this. This is an extremely important topic, and I'm going to keep it simple. I am running for Atlanta City Council to continue to fight for a city that thrives for all of us. No matter what side of town you live on, no matter what zip code you live in, no matter what income you make, we should all be able to take advantage of the great things that make this city great, and also should be able to have the opportunity to live in this city affordably, have safe and healthy neighborhoods, have meaningful work opportunities where we're all earning a livable wage, and to also have a thriving infrastructure and green space throughout. I am the only candidate in this race with the experience of not only knowing the problems, working through the problems, but also having solutions. And so I encourage you, and I encourage you to visit my website, www.collinsforatlanta.com, and I hope to earn your vote and support as the only experienced, proven leader on this panel. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Well, thank you so much to all 5 candidates. This was, I hope, very informative to everyone here. What? What's happening? Oh, well, thank you all so much for joining us. I do want to invite Felicia Moore, if you would like to say something on behalf of the church.
Hey, everybody. It's so good to see a lot of people I haven't seen in a while. Thank you so much. This is my church, and I am honored to be able to welcome you here. Thank you for using this facility. Hillside is always here for you in the community. On behalf of our beloved founder, and her pictures are in the back, Dr. Barbara Lewis King, and our bishop, Bishop Jack Bomar, we certainly welcome you and want you to know, as you are talking about housing, that we hear that conversation. I am also the Director of Community Development and Engagement for the church. We have 21 acres, so our visionary leader, Dr. Barbara King, purchased a lot of property right in and around this church. We're looking at making sure that it's attainable, that it's affordable, that it uplifts the community. We also have a waiting list for some of the properties. We want to make sure people in the community, particularly across the street, will be senior housing. On this side of the church will be either micro housing or some of the things you talked about, having to get some zoning changes to do, and then retail as well, state-of-the-art retail. And you'll be real excited if we're able to pull off those plans. Right now, we are talking with and engaging with development teams to make sure that we can get it into reality and make sure that we can make it affordable. So please stay tuned to what we're doing here. And if you have any questions, I'll give you my card and my phone number, and I can certainly keep you informed on what's going on here at the Hill. Thank you so much again for coming tonight.
Talk about doing the work. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.